Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where normally I explore and theorycraft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. But today, we have a small change of pace as we're going to be exploring a character build for Daggerheart. We are going to be jumping right into the character build, so if you aren't familiar with the system, I'll be sure to link some resources in the description below that go more over the rules, character options, and even how combat works. With that said, let's jump on into this Daggerheart character build. So admittedly, the title of the video is a bit tongue-in-cheek. Wizards are certainly strong in Daggerheart, as they are in a lot of other TTRPG systems, but what makes them strong is their potential for power through the synergies of the domains they share. As a refresher, every class in Daggerheart is made up of 2 domains, and these domains give you the various spells, abilities, or powers that your character has. Wizards have access to the Codex domain and the Splendor domain. Codex is their bread and butter, giving them access to a plethora of different spells and abilities through grimoire cards, spell cards, etc. Splendor, on the other hand, is a more support-oriented domain. It offers that support in the form of healing, buffing, and in some cases, straight-up boosting damage. Each domain on its own is no more powerful than the other domains in the system, but together, well, together they can get a little silly. Let me introduce you to Mac, the Magical Archival Construct. Mac was a character I played recently in a one-shot for the fully released Daggerheart system. I got to play with Insight Check, D&D Unoptimized, and Zarek from Odin's Key Gaming. We had a blast trying out the actual full release of the Daggerheart system. Mac was my attempt to show off 2 main things from the system. Number 1, why Fireball is busted, and 2, why the Wizard as a class shouldn't really be tied to the Splendor domain, at least in my opinion. Today, we're going to be doing a brief overview of the build, what combos I was using, and why they got a bit silly. First, let's talk about the chassis of Mac's build. The combination of the Clank ancestry, as well as the School of Knowledge Wizard subclass. The main combo here was combining purposeful design from the Clank with Adept from the Knowledge Wizard. This allowed me to gain a +1 to one of my experiences, which could then be doubled when added to a roll if I spent stress instead of a hope. As a refresher, experiences are words, phrases, or skills that describe your character's literal experiences. They can be applied to any action roll in the game if they feel applicable, typically by spending a hope. In the case of a Knowledge Wizard though, instead of a hope, we can spend a stress. This means that with the right experiences, we can get some pretty powerful modifiers to our rolls, and the Clank ancestry just exacerbates that a little bit. Now before I get into the weeds about why that combo was so good, I will add that the Clank's secondary ability of Efficient and the Wizard's Prepared ability didn't combo together specifically, but both provided really good bonus effects. An extra domain card right away at level 1, along with the ability to perform a long rest move during a short rest, are both excellent. Just extra free things that help us out in the long run. Jumping back to the experiences though, the reason I wanted to boost my experiences specifically is because you can, if you choose, apply your experiences to combat rolls, such as attacks and spellcast rolls. The idea here was to create an experience that would be applicable to casting Fireball and allow me to assure that the spellcast roll landed as much as possible. By level 5, these were the experiences I had, and with our Heat Dispersal Device, or HDD, sitting at a +4, our Knowledge Wizard ability of Adept allowed us to add a cool +8 to our spellcast rolls for Fireball, along with any other applicable fire-based spell. Now, what is the Heat Dispersal Device, or HDD, you ask? Well, for Mac, I wanted to be a little goofy and make all my experiences based off computer puns, since he was a construct. However, I also wanted to try and get at least one experience that could be realistically applied to the casting of Fireball. Enter the Heat Dispersal Device. An experience designed to help me disperse, or maybe it should have been dispense, heat. With this experience, the goal was to use it as the main catalyst for casting Fireball, in order to ensure that the spellcast roll of the Fireball card actually landed on target. So now we know what the base chassis of the build was, utilizing a powerful experience combo in order to make the most out of our signature spell. But what does this have to do with the Splendor domain? Well, to answer that, let's go through the level up options. At level 2, I buffed our knowledge and agility and bumped up 2 separate experiences by +1, which is how we got the HDD to +4. We had started it at +2, got it to +3 thanks to the Clank Purposeful Design ability, and then for our domain card, took the Book of Sigil. We'll come back to why that is important later. At level 3, I took an extra 1 hit point and a +1 to evasion. Wizards aren't really meant to spike evasion, but the little extra actually didn't hurt at all. For the domain card at level 3, of course, I took Book of Norai, which, yes, is how we get Fireball, as well as another ability, but that one surprisingly didn't come up that often. At level 4, since it is the last level in Tier 2, I took another 1 hit point and went back and chose an additional domain card. This is where I got the first of our 2 main Splendor cards, and really the more problematic of the 2, Voice of Reason. For our actual domain card, I took the level 4 Book of Grin for the Firewall pun. Lastly, in Tier 3 at level 5, which is where we were running the one-shot at, I put both level up options directly into increasing my proficiency to get it to 4. It had went up to 2 and then 3 automatically as we reached each new tier, but getting it to 4 was the first chance I had at actually getting an extra boost to the proficiency. And proficiency will come into play a lot later. For the domain card here, I took Smite, because yeah, why shouldn't a wizard be able to smite, right? When all those choices came together, we ended up with the following loadout of cards: Voice of Reason, Book of Sigil, Book of Norai, Book of Grin, and Smite. Now that we know the loadout we were going to be using for the one-shot, let's take a closer look at each card and the exact combos that made them so powerful. First up is Fireball. Fireball, D20 plus 5 damage. Yes, D20. That is an actual weapon damage die in Daggerheart. It also scales with proficiency in Fireball's case, so when we got this at level 3, it was actually 2d20 plus 5, and now at level 5, with our level up choice, it's 4d20 plus 5 total. Technically, it is balanced by having a requirement of an actual spellcast roll to be made, meaning you could just fail casting it to begin with, but even if you succeed and end up hitting the target you're aiming for, that target, as well as every other enemy within very close range of them, do have the chance to dodge on a reaction roll and only take half damage. But even half of 4d20 plus 5 is probably still major or severe damage at this tier. It'll easily clear minions without question, and of course the most absurd part, there's no cooldown. We can just repeatedly swing for 4d20 plus 5 or half as much on a success of the enemy's reaction roll every single turn. Even if the enemies do mitigate a bunch of damage by dodging out of the way of the blast of Fireball, there's another one coming for them on our next turn whenever that happens to be. Over to Voice of Reason, the first half of this card is kind of egregious because it allows our wizard to become more of a social character. We gain advantage on certain social situations just flat out. No resource requirement to spend or anything like that, we just have it. The second half, however, is what makes the card really nasty. If we max out on our stress, which admittedly is a big ask since being maxed out on stress is very dangerous, we actually get to increase our proficiency by +1. That means those fireballs we're throwing are now 5d20 plus 5, which is absolutely silly. What's sillier though is using an experience to get a +8 to our fireball spellcast roll from our HDD, which only costs us stress since we're a knowledge wizard. At this point, everything's kind of coming up Millhouse. Now over to Book of Sigil. Book of Sigil gives us a few nice illusion abilities, but the main thing we care about is Paralela. Paralela says that we can spend 2 hope to add a target to our next attack. Whether we succeed or miss, that one attack roll can target an additional enemy. Fireball isn't an attack, but given that this does combo with Smite, which we'll talk about next, it was kinda hard to pass up. Looking at Smite, Smite says that if we spend 3 hope, then on the next successful attack we make, we can deal double damage. Parallella, which we just talked about, does add a target, but doesn't make us do an extra attack, meaning we can swing at 2 enemies for double the damage, all for the exorbitant cost of 5 hope. Expensive, but if it works out, it's worth it. Finally, the Book of Grin. This, like I said, was mainly for the firewall pun. At this point, the build is actually winding down, but we still have a couple gaps to fill. We need some weapons. At least we would if we didn't have Fireball, the infinitely repeatable, full, very long ranged weapon that it is. Nevertheless, for the sake of this one shot, we were allowed to take any tier 3 or lower equipment, so after checking out the tier 3 gear, oh god, no. The first thing I found was the primary weapon that I used, the Runes of Ruination. It has very close range, deals d20 plus 4 damage, one-handed, and it's a knowledge weapon. It is literally ideal for us. What's the drawback with it, you ask? Well, if we successfully hit an enemy with it, we do have to mark a stress. A stress, you say? That's right, with this weapon we could get our stress maxed out faster and have a second way to swing for 5d20 against an enemy. Not to mention that as a weapon, the Runes of Ruination would mix perfectly with both Smite and Parallella. The idea of spending 5 hope to deal double damage from a roll of 5d20 plus 4 was too silly not to pass up for the one shot. You know what's funnier than doubling 5d20 plus 4 though? Doubling 6d20 plus 4. Our secondary weapon is what brought the build all together, the Powered Gauntlet. A weapon that is completely irrelevant besides its charged ability. We can spend a stress to increase our proficiency by +1 when attacking with a primary weapon. The Powered Gauntlet is a secondary weapon and also one-handed, so we can technically dual wield both the Runes of Ruination and this gauntlet at the same time. And all it costs to up our proficiency is spending a stress. A stress, you say? Yeah, with the combo of these 2 knowledge weapons, we can spend 2 stress to swing for 5d20 plus 4. Then, if we time it right and mark our last stress by landing a hit with the Runes of Ruination and maxing out our stress from succeeding on that attack, our damage will end up boosting to 6d20 plus 4 thanks to Voice of Reason. Now all this has been well and good, but what does any of this 5d20, 6d20 nonsense really mean? Don't the thresholds of the Daggerheart system mean that even if we do 1 billion damage, we're only causing the enemy to actually lose just 3 hit points? Well, yes, but that's exactly the thing. As a quick reminder, damage in Daggerheart doesn't correlate directly at a 1-to-1 ratio to how much health an enemy loses. Rather, the more damage you deal, the more hit points an enemy will lose on a scale from 1 to 3. So, even if we did do 100 plus damage, all that means is that the enemy we blast is going to lose 3 hit points from that individual attack. We can't outright kill an enemy with these combos, but we can certainly take out a huge chunk of their health bar. What makes Mac particularly broken though, or at least wizards in general with the Splendor domain and Codex domain synergizing so well, is the ease in which you can repeat those massive attacks and effectively always swing above that severe damage threshold. Sure, maybe we don't one-shot a monster, but two-shotting is extremely possible. For reference, in the one-shot in the final fight, we were going up against not tier 3 enemies, like a typical level 5 Daggerheart character would, but rather tier 4 enemies. And the damage output that Mac could pull off was able to clear the severe threshold on these max level tier 4 enemies. That's almost absurd. Now the big criticism. Isn't Daggerheart supposed to be a narrative-focused game? Why would I dare optimize? Well, for 2 reasons. 1, because I do like finding interesting combos in the mechanics of a game system and then use roleplay/flavor in order to tell a story about why those combos exist in this character. Reason 2, this was meant to be an overly optimized combat-oriented build. The fact that we were doing this one-shot and the amount of synergies in the wizard's kit between Codex and Splendor, plus the weapons they have access to, it was all too ridiculous not to put together for this specific one-shot. Not to mention, I wasn't even playing the combat-oriented wizard, but rather the utility-knowledgeable one. Why does that matter? Well, because for all the damage I've talked about Mac being able to dish out, he had a plethora of other non-combat resources. Illusions, arcane locks, sleep, mage hand from level 1 cards that I didn't even touch on in the video. Overall, the one-shot was a blast, pun intended, and I do look forward to playing more Daggerheart again. Probably not with such an optimized build, but with other fun combos that would be neat to try out on different characters. But for now, I'll just gripe a little bit that Fireball is excessively powerful, and that wizards probably should have had 2 different domains rather than Codex and Splendor. Let me know what you thought of the video and if you liked the change of pace with a Daggerheart character build. Did you like the optimization, or would you create a more laid-back character? And of course, do you agree about wizards having access to the Splendor domain? Is there another domain that could fit better for them in your mind? As always, thank you for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.